Welcome to Retirement GPS, navigated by Zane, your roadmap to a secure and confident retirement. Each week, we explore strategies, stories, and planning frameworks designed to help you navigate the complexities of life after work. From tax planning to investments, income strategies to risk management, our goal is to give you the clarity and confidence you need to make informed decisions. But retirement isn't just about the numbers. It's also about lifestyle, purpose, and peace of mind. We're here to guide you through both the financial details and the personal dimensions of this next chapter. Let's chart today's course.
Hello, folks, and welcome back to the Retirement GPS podcast. This is episode 15. I'm your host, Ryan Zaharchek, certified financial planner, and I'm here with my co-host, the man, the myth, the legend.
It's good to be back, Ryan. It's Zane Belsack, your associate planner here at Zane.
We have a big topic to talk about today. It's something that we've touched on in prior podcasts, but today we want to dive deep into our long-term care planning, long-term care insurance, everything related to long-term care. I know it's not the sexiest topic in financial planning. A lot of these topics aren't. We're not trading options here and doubling our money in hours. We're talking about long-term protection for ourselves and our family when we need it the most. So I want to start with a story because this is a story that really, it happens a lot in our office where we have people that come in and they're really confused about this topic and they want to talk it through because they're concerned. And the couple that we'll call Eleanor and Mike had watched their parents spend down their savings fast because they lived in New Jersey and they had to go into a nursing home. We walked through a few paths for them to prepare for their long-term care planning because their parents had not properly prepared. Their parents hadn't even talked about it and hadn't thought about it. They didn't have a long-term care plan in place. Long-term care insurance is just one way to plan. So it's great if you do have long-term care insurance, but it's not the only way to plan. In the case of Mike's mother and father, they just didn't have a plan in place. What were they going to do and what was going to happen with their assets?
So they were essentially just drawing off of their savings while in a long-term care facility. How long does that usually last? That doesn't really seem very viable.
It can last pretty much as long as you have the assets to continue to pay. And really, if we're looking at the cost of long-term care in New Jersey, now, you could have somebody come into the house a couple times a week for a few hours and get away with about $1,500 a month on the really low end for some long-term care. But if you're looking at a full-time facility, it can be anywhere from $10,000 to $15,000 a month in New Jersey. And it can be a little cheaper outside of the Northeast or out west. If you're looking more in the South or Midwest, you might get away with a little bit cheaper. Long-term care facilities are high demand because we have an aging population and the pricing power is there. You're going to pay a fair amount of money if you need long-term care, if full-time care in a facility. It's really expensive. So you do the math. You're looking at, gosh, let's just say $10,000 a month for 12 months, you're $120,000 a year. And in the case of Eleanor and Mike, it was a husband and wife. Their mother and father were both in the facility. $20,000 a month, $240,000 a year. Had to save a pretty penny to even get through a couple of years at that fee.
That's where the topic today comes in, long-term care insurance, because numbers like that don't lie.
Yeah, you're not kidding. It can get really expensive. But even people that we talk with that have very solid net worths, we are talking through the pros and cons of long-term care insurance. And really what we want to understand more than anything is what is the risk that we're taking on, right? Long-term care insurance is like any other type of insurance. It is not a cage. Like, we're not looking to protect against and confirm that we're not going to have a long-term care need. We're looking for a guardrail just to make sure we're financially protected. That's all insurance can do. We don't buy life insurance to protect us from dying. It protects us from the devastation, our heirs and our dependents from the devastation if we do die. Long-term care is the same thing. Clearly, it's not going to keep us from needing a facility. What it's going to keep us from is bankruptcy, making sure that we don't run out of money. We have money left for our heirs, and most importantly, for our spouse. We never say to anybody, don't buy fire insurance because your house is probably not going to burn down. And no person has ever walked into my office, sat down and said, I can't believe I bought my fire insurance last year. My house didn't burn down. I just keep throwing away money on fire insurance because it's a ridiculous conversation to have. We all know why. Long-term care is the exact same way. We're not buying it expecting that we're going to have this great return on it. We're not trying to get a great return. What we're trying to get is protection. So let's talk a little bit about why we need long-term care, what long-term care is, and how we as financial planners think about it and how you should think about it in your own life so that when you're deciding, hey, is this kind of the right fit for me? Exactly what are the variables? What are the things that you need to think about to make sure that you're making a good decision when it comes to protecting and developing a long-term care plan? First and foremost, long-term care, what is it? Long-term care is not acute care. Acute care is I break my leg, I go to the hospital, they set my bones, I'm in a cast for 6 weeks or so, and they take the cast off, and I'm effectively healed after that. Acute care means I have a problem, I go to the doctor or to the hospital to fix it, it is fixed in some period of time, and I'm now better. We call that acute care. That is covered by your health insurance. That is covered by Medicare. Long-term care doesn't fall into that category. Why? Because long-term care is generally a situation where you're not expected to get better. That's why it's called long-term. Now, that can be a little bit more challenging to determine. How do we determine if I'm eligible or I need long-term care? And we use what's called the activities of daily living. And you're going to see that when it comes to long-term care quite a bit. The activities of daily living are actually, there's 6 of them. And there's regular activities that we all do every day. And if you're not able to do 2 out of the 6 of those activities of daily living, you are then deemed as eligible for long-term care or in need of long-term care. Let's talk about those 6 activities. They are bathing, dressing, toileting, transferring, so moving from a bed to a chair or getting up, eating, and then continence. So those are the 6 activities of daily living. Like I said, most of us listening to the podcast can actively do those 6 things very easily every day. But when we reach a certain age, or if we develop a disease like Parkinson's or a cognitive impairment such as Alzheimer's, those 6 activities may start to become challenging. And if we can't do 2 of them, then we potentially need long-term care, or our long-term care policy that we have, we're eligible for. So where does long-term care happen? Long-term care can actually happen anywhere. A lot of people will insist, I only want to have long-term care in my home. If I can't do 2 of these 6 activities of daily living and I need a long-term care support, then I want that in my home 100%. And although it's a nice theory, that's not always the case, especially when we're talking about something like Alzheimer's, where you might need round-the-clock care. And I personally have a family member who's dealt with Alzheimer's, and they were taking care of an elderly uncle who moved into this woman's house, and the uncle actually became very unruly and difficult to take care of. He would run out into the street in the middle of the night. He became physically abusive. Being home was just not an option, no matter how much we all want that to happen. If we can't handle the situation, we may need a facility to take care of that. So home is the first option. An assisted living facility is another good option. Assisted living is fantastic in the sense that I may have a challenge with, say, 2 activities of daily living, but I'm relatively healthy otherwise. I'm very cognitively sharp. I want to spend time with friends or at least contemporaries, people my age, doing activities and doing things that I love to do every day, but I just need some support. I just need help, and I probably will need more and more help as time goes on. This is your typical, say, 90-year-old that may be struggling just day to day with the activities of daily living, but still has a good quality of life and still is relatively healthy. And it also may be somebody who's in their 50s and 60s, who's early diagnosis of Parkinson's, and again, starting to develop some problems, but still has a very normal, active type of life.
Just comparing the 2 of being in a home and assisted living, it seems like you could be pretty spry and be in assisted living, whereas I guess the differences between that and a nursing home are what, if you just have less capabilities?
Sure, and a nursing home is the last of the 3. The nursing home is really the most intense of the care, and that certainly is for somebody who is really struggling, probably somebody who doesn't have much time left typically. Now, that's not always the case, but that is often the case, is they're more towards the tail end. The new world today really is merging assisted living and nursing home, so they're actually calling it a continuing care facility, which means I want to start with assisted living, we're in pretty good shape, but we don't want to have to move if we need more intense care, more intense type of hand-holding for the activities of daily living. Obviously, the price is going to be different as well, so that will affect the different places that you are.
I've never heard of that. I didn't know that they were doing a transfer of assisted living to a nursing home. I thought it was one or the other.
Yeah, it makes it very easy now on those who need the long-term care, especially if they see the progression, and the progression is gradual, to not have to move right away into a nursing home if they really only need assisted living, and not move into assisted living thinking, "Oh, I'll be here until I need to move to a nursing home," which of course is not ideal. Nobody wants to get comfortable in a place and then move. So the continuing care facilities are really valuable. Now let's talk a little bit about how the benefits work. So there is a monthly or daily maximum on your benefits. And typically we like to work from a monthly max. A lot of times you'll see what the daily max is. You just have to do some multiplication. We are typically looking, if we're recommending a long-term care policy, we're typically looking for about $10,000 a month in the state of New Jersey. Some people want a little bit more because they would prefer to be insured for nicer facilities. But you just have to figure out what's the right fit for you and also what's the right fit for your budget. Obviously, the higher the benefit, then the higher the premium, which means you're going to pay more.
Is that something that's decided when you make the policy? If you have a monthly versus daily max, what's the differences? Why not just choose a daily if the numbers are the same?
It's really just how the math is calculated. You can have a daily max, just multiply it by 365 to see what your annual number is, multiply it by 30, 31 to get your monthly number. And really what we're looking for is a pool of money. If we know it's going to cost us roughly, we're just going to say $10,000 a year for a nursing home, we multiply that by 12 and we know we've got $120,000 in a year. If the daily max or the monthly max works out to roughly $120,000 a year, then we know we're in good shape. We're getting the benefit that we're looking for. It's just different insurance companies calculate it differently. Next is the benefit period. So how many years? Now, this is another tricky question because how many years do I need to be in a long-term care facility? The statistics are pretty clear. If we are insuring against, say, nursing home, which is our $10,000 a month number, then statistics show that about 80% of people that go into a nursing home, a full care facility, pass away within 3 years. So 3 years of full nursing care typically will cover the majority of your risk. About 96% pass away within 5 years. So it's very rare that an individual will move into a full care facility and live more than 5 years. And when you start insuring those really rare situations is when the premiums skyrocket, right? The insurance companies want to know the limit of their liability. If you were to buy an unlimited benefit period, which I'm not even sure exists anymore. They did exist for a long time. There may still be some out there. We haven't seen a lot of those lately where you just say, you're covered as long as you need it. As long as you need your $10,000 a month, you're covered for an unlimited period of time. You might pay 3 times the premium as someone who's getting a 3 or 5 year benefit and with a very small chance of using it. So the premiums don't make sense when we talk about benefit period of going past 3 to 5 years. Typically, we tell people we're looking for a 3 to 5 year policy. 3 years if you want to keep your premiums lower and at least get some sort of protection. 5 years if you want what we would call as much full protection as makes sense in this world and you're comfortable with higher premiums. We also want to look at elimination period. So elimination period is really very much what we would call your out-of-pocket expense, right? If you go to the drugstore and you were to purchase a prescription medicine, you would have your out-of-pocket, right? You would have your deductible for insurance parlance. That's what your elimination period is. How long are you going to pay for it out of pocket before the insurance kicks in? And that could be anywhere from 30 days to 180 days. And just like a deductible on your auto insurance or on your medical insurance, the higher the deductible, the lower the cost of the policy. So if you get 180 days, which is 6 months, you're going to pay your long-term care for 6 months, but then the benefit will kick in. Remember the statistics we talked about. If you go into a nursing home and the life expectancy is less than 3 years, if you're paying the first 6 months, long-term care knows they're on the hook for 2.5 years on average.
So it seems like the elimination period is really just the buffer. So you buy the policy, the elimination period kicks in, and then when it's over, then your policy starts to go into effect.
Correct. Yep. So you're on the hook for a relatively small amount of money. And it may not be a small amount of money if, again, you're doing 6 months at $10,000 a month. You're talking about $60,000, but you're not paying hundreds of thousands of dollars. And remember, now if you have a 3-year policy and you pay the first 6 months, now you've got 3.5 years in a facility before your long-term care runs out. Because you paid the first 6 months, you get 3 years of coverage. And at 3.5 years, you're now out of money and you're going back to paying again. So if we go back to our 5-year, really outside frame in a nursing home, now you've got only about another 18 months to cover. You're really on the hook for the 2 years, and it's a lot less at $240,000 than it would be to cover $600,000 for 5 years. The last thing we want to look at is inflation protection. This can be really important, but it also can really increase the premium. Inflation protection is the same as any other inflation conversation we've had. Costs go up over time. The cost of stamps have gone up. The cost of milk has gone up. The cost of a movie ticket has gone up over the last 20 years. So we don't want to rehash this issue, but medical expenses, the cost of long-term care has skyrocketed a lot quicker than inflation. So adding a rider to increase your benefit over time to keep up with inflation can be really valuable, because if you bought a $10,000 policy today, meaning $10,000 a month in benefit, if you're at 55 or 60 years old, which is typically where we recommend buying a policy, and you don't need it until you're 80, you can do some simple math and a compounding of 4 or 5%. All of a sudden, your benefit's going to be worth about a third of what you expected it to be worth, because it's not keeping up with inflation. So adding a cost of living inflation adjustment over time is really valuable and is highly encouraged, unless you really just can't pay the premiums, or you're older when you get the policy, which typically doesn't happen because most older people can't even qualify for a long-term care policy. We'll talk about that in a minute.
Inflation protection has been a recurring theme in a lot of our episodes. You or I have really talked about movie tickets increasing twice, probably. But I think a good word to keep in mind is something called COLA, right, Ryan? And it stands for cost of living adjustment. And it's basically something that might be inserted instead of inflation protection. And it's just something to keep in mind when you're getting a policy.
Yeah, absolutely right. So what we want to do now is talk a little bit about the types of coverage and how do we protect ourselves. So there's really two types of insurance that we want to talk about today. The first one is your traditional long-term care insurance. You can think of this as going to buy a life insurance policy and buying a term policy, right? Very straightforward. When we buy long-term care insurance, it protects you against long-term care. And there will be all the variables we just discussed. So what is your maximum monthly or daily benefit? What is the benefit period? What's the elimination period? And what is the inflation protection? And then they'll calculate a premium based off of all that information. They will probably do a physical on you, especially if you're buying a more expensive policy, just to see what kind of health you're in. And then you'll get premiums based off of that, very similar to your life insurance. The pros are it's very strong, pure insurance. You know what you're getting and you know what you're paying for it. And when it comes to insurance, that's how we like to think about it. We really like to keep it clean and say, this is what I'm getting, this is what I'm paying for, and I'm willing to make that exchange. There's also a broad menu of settings, so you have those levers you can pull. You can increase the inflation protection if you want. You can reduce the elimination period if you want, and you can see exactly how that's going to affect the premium. The cons are that premiums are not supposed to increase on pure long-term care insurance, but they often do. And the reason why they're not supposed to and they do is because when they quote you, your premium is supposed to be quoted for life, but there is a stipulation in there that if there is a miscalculation in their numbers, they can actually go to the state and request an increase, and the state has to approve it. Now, the last, say, 15 years, they have had multiple increases with the state approving them because they have woefully underpriced long-term care insurance. So anybody who bought a policy from 2005 to 2015, probably through 2020, actually way underpaid for their long-term care insurance policy, which is fantastic. You underpaid for a long period of time. But the downside, and it doesn't feel good, but it's okay, is that they're getting letters. In fact, there's people I work with who are getting letters once a year from their long-term care carrier saying, your policy premiums are going up, your policy premiums are going up, here are your options. You can either take a reduced benefit and keep your premiums the same, or you can take a much higher premium to keep your benefit the same. And it's a really frustrating decision, especially when you thought you were locked in. But as I told all the people that come to me with this problem, I say, this is a good problem to have. You have underpaid for a long time with your long-term care policy, and we don't want to get rid of it now. So we figure out what is the right step for each individual. So it really is the best policy for maximizing your care dollars and just purchasing pure insurance. We do recommend that this type of policy is purchased well before the time you need it. Typically, the time for utilizing a long-term care policy is in your 80s or 90s. The best window is typically 50 to 64 years old. I got to tell you, if you're 60 to 64, you're really coming out of the window of eligibility. What I mean by that is there's two things that we want to consider. One, am I even eligible for long-term care? If I have rheumatoid arthritis, if I have a history of cancer, there is a good chance I may not even get approved for long-term care insurance, meaning I can't get it. That can be a problem. So the older you get, the higher the probability that you won't get approved for your long-term care insurance policy. And then the second is, of course, premiums. The younger that we get the policy, the lower the premiums. Obviously, that also means the longer we pay into those premiums, but the premiums are lower and spread out over a longer period of time. So it's definitely something to consider. We typically will be recommending somebody between 50 and 60 getting a quote on long-term care if it fits in their financial plan. The second type of policy that we talk about is a hybrid life and long-term care policy. So basically, it's a long-term care benefit that's tied to a life insurance policy. And this can be very exciting to a lot of people because what they do is they look at this and they say, in the traditional long-term care insurance, if I pass away and I don't use my long-term care benefits, I lose them. All those premiums went down the drain for all those years. Again, I equate that to your fire insurance. You don't look back over 30 years and say, my house never burned down. I can't believe I paid all that money towards fire insurance. It's a risk that we're protecting, and we understand we're paying to do that. That doesn't mean we want that risk to happen to us. I will be very happy if I'm 95 years old and I'm out walking the streets, I'm getting some exercise, and I drop dead of a quick heart attack. That's the way I want to go. Or maybe in my sleep. I don't know. That sounds about the right way to go, right?
I don't want to be sitting in a hospital for 3 to 5 years. I'd be pretty happy if my insurance never kicked in, if my house never caught on fire.
100%. And we should be happy if our long-term care insurance never kicks in. However, if we don't use it, we lose it on traditional long-term care insurance. With our hybrid policy, we are building up a cash value as, i.e. whole life insurance would. And what we're doing is we're able to use our benefits towards long-term care, which can be appealing because either we're going to use it for long-term care or, like I said, I'm going to be out walking and getting some exercise and drop dead of a heart attack at 95, and my heirs are going to get the benefit on the life insurance policy. So either way, someone's getting something, and I don't feel like I'm quote-unquote wasting the money. The pros are there is some benefit regardless of what happens, and the premiums are guaranteed. So you're less likely to be denied due to health issues. It doesn't mean you can't be denied. Again, if you have cancer or a history of heart disease, you may be denied for the life insurance, but they have less restrictions than long-term care, especially for illnesses such as rheumatoid arthritis, which may not necessarily be life-threatening, but it may trigger a long-term care need. The cons are that the premiums are definitely going to be higher. You're going to be paying more into those premiums. The duration may be capped. You may not have as much time to use the long-term care as needed, and you may have some upfront costs with a long-term care hybrid policy, whereas with the pure long-term care, you don't have those upfront costs. So there's no right answer. It really is what is right for you and what you want to think about. We want you to also think about the fact that most states, the state of New Jersey is one of them, has what's called a long-term care partnership when you're deciding what kind of policy to get and how much to get. Partnership is a pretty cool program offered by the state. See, the problem is if you go into a long-term care facility, Medicare, okay, so our traditional health insurance through Medicare when we turn 65 is not going to cover a long-term care need. But if we run out of money, Medicaid is going to step in. So Medicaid is the health insurance for the poor, the indigent. That is really where Medicaid's going to come in and Medicaid's going to shine because they're going to step up and they're going to pay for it. Now, I don't think it's anybody's intention to just run out of money and then have Medicaid pay for it, but it is the fallback if we do happen to run out of money because we don't have a plan. Okay, so they're not going to just kick you into the street if you run out of money in your facility. If you run out of money, the Medicaid kicks in. Your heirs are not going to get anything, though. You will be completely out of money. The partnership program is a great program where effectively what they do is they match dollar for dollar the protection that you have by the state. See, the state is incentivized to encourage you to get long-term care insurance because if you don't and you run out of money, then you're a ward of the state. Now the state has got to pay for everything because Medicaid is typically run through the state with federal funding. What the states want to do is they want to encourage you to go get your insurance. So as an example, if I were to go out and I were to get a 5-year policy at $10,000 a month, and we break that out, that's a $600,000 benefit. The partnership program says if I have a $600,000 benefit on my long-term care policy, then I only have to burn my assets down to $600,000, i.e. the benefit of the policy before Medicaid will kick in, which is a really great advantage because it allows me or my spouse, which we haven't really spent a lot of time talking about, and we have to talk about that, or my heirs to keep $600,000 of my money, and now Medicaid will cover me. So that's a really valuable program. 44 of the 50 states have a partnership program of some kind, including most of the people listening to this podcast. So take a look and see if your state has a partnership program. And if they do, keep that in mind when you're considering or actually purchasing your long-term care policy, because you really want to make sure that you're maximizing that benefit and knowing that whatever benefit you have, you're able to keep those funds and still go on Medicaid.
Do you know why a state wouldn't have this kind of partnership plan in place?
No, I don't. Honestly, it seems like it would be a money saving to the state. My initial thought is that the states just don't want to spend the money, quote unquote, but they probably long term would save money by encouraging people to get long term care plans. It really is just priorities by state. Obviously, most states feel like it's really valuable. It may also be a logistical thing. There's not a problem in certain states, so they're not really addressing it. Let's talk a little bit about strategy. When somebody comes in and we're talking about long-term care, there's a couple things that we want to think about. First is, what is your net worth? What are we protecting with our long-term care insurance? So if we are going to develop a strategy, we want to really think through what type of strategies are available to us and what strategy is right for us in our circumstances. So there's really 4 ways to protect or develop a long-term care strategy. The first one is self-funding. Self-funding is basically just using your own money, whether that be your investments, your cash assets, your home equity, to pay for any long-term care need. Second is Medicaid. And as I talked about, that means I don't have a lot of money, so I'm just going to effectively run out of money and Medicaid will pay for it. The third is traditional long-term care policy, which again, we've talked about. That is your pure insurance. And then the last is your hybrid life and long-term care policy. Let's talk about each one. So we will look at the net worth of an individual that we're talking to about long-term care, and we're really looking for a sweet spot. The sweet spot there is anyone with a net worth of $500,000 to $2 million. That is trending up as inflation is kicking in and the costs of long-term care facilities are going higher, but it's a good framework to start. I probably would start looking at $600,000 to about $2.5 million, but let's just say $500,000 to $2 million is a great place to work from. Now, what do I mean by that? If you have less than $500,000 in net worth and you're retired or over the age of 65, there is a good chance that you're not going to be able to afford long-term care insurance anyway, and you really don't have a ton to protect. Now, don't get me wrong, the money that you do have is really important to you, but there's just not a lot there to protect. What we're always concerned about is, yes, we're concerned about protecting our legacy, but in all fairness, the people that I talk to, that's not their biggest concern. I don't really necessarily care if I'm going to leave a big chunk of money to my kids. I really need it for me, and then whatever's left, they get. And that tends to be the mentality that we hear from people when they come in. What they're mostly concerned about, what we're mostly concerned about, is bankrupting a spouse. Because typically, and again, we're going off statistics here, no guarantees, but typically the man is the one that needs the long-term care facility first, right? The spouse tends to live longer and be healthier a little bit later. So the woman in the relationship tends to live longer and doesn't need long-term care right off the bat. As I said, statistically, a man is going to go into the long-term care facility, spend $10,000 a month. If there's no insurance, effectively you're bankrupting your spouse who is still healthy, living in their house in retirement. They're going to be using their savings. They're going to be using their investments. They're going to be even using their home equity and eventually have to sell the house to go on Medicaid. And now the wife is basically going to be living on her own Social Security, can't even live on his Social Security, and live at a very low level of income in order to pay for the husband's long-term care. It doesn't really matter the gender. If the wife goes into a long-term care facility first and the husband's home, same exact thing could happen. So we're less concerned about gender, but more concerned about statistics here, that it's very concerning that one spouse may bankrupt another because they need a long-term care facility. So buying insurance is really important to protect a spouse. However, if the couple already has less than a $500,000 net worth, we're talking about going out and buying insurance on both of them. That's going to come to $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 a year in premiums. We're probably not going to be able to afford it. So that's the threshold where we say we're going to self-insure, and we're just going to work around the risk and do the best we can to manage the risk. If you're between $500,000 and $2 million, you now have a lot to protect, right? We definitely can protect it from bankrupting a spouse by going out and getting insurance. You also have the means to do it. If I have $1 million net worth or $1 million in investments, those are the investments I want to protect by going out and buying long-term care policy, even if it's $4,000 per person, so $8,000 a year per couple. I'm protecting a very large net worth, and I'm making sure that I'm not bankrupting my spouse. And then once we get over the $2 million, $2.5 million range, meaning home equity, to complete net worth, right? So all assets totaled, we're at a place where we probably can self-insure. Think about the risk that we're talking about, right? We're talking about the risk of anywhere from $300,000 to maybe $600,000 on the outside. If we have a $600,000 risk that we're looking to insure, and we have a $2 million, $2.5, $3 million net worth, we're not going to be bankrupting our spouse, even if we have to pay for that out of pocket. And what it does in the short term is it protects us from having to pay, again, $6,000 to $8,000 a year in annual premiums for our long-term care policies.
And those premiums, they're not friendly, but they, in the long term, really help out compared to that $600,000 number that you were discussing before.
Yeah, and again, the premiums are really variable. If you get a long-term care policy when you're 50, you may only pay $1,500 a month. If you get it when you're 60, 62, now you're paying $4,000 or $5,000 a month, and that's where it goes parabolic. Even if you do get approved at 66, you may be paying $6,000 a year in premiums per person. So that it just becomes prohibitively expensive, but it can be really valuable if it's done right. So I think we have enough information for you to go off and start thinking about what is the right plan for you. You know what a long-term care policy is, you know what a long-term care plan is, you know why you need it, and you really know the various strategies that we think about when we're talking about it. So think about your situation. Obviously, if you're single and you don't have a very high net worth, probably just taking the risk and dealing with, I'm not going to bankrupt the spouse, I'm okay with that, and if I run out of money, I'll be on Medicaid. Then understanding the Medicaid strategy is not a bad way to go. And especially if I'm a widow or widower, don't have any children, these are the types of things that we would be thinking about. If I'm a married couple that has high net worth and it's growing pretty aggressively, we're probably going to self-insure. And if I'm a married couple with a modest net worth that, and I don't want to say modest, $1 million is a strong net worth, but we're right in that sort of window of that $500,000 to $2 million. We really should be looking at pricing long-term care insurance when we're between 50 and 55 years old. Try to lock in those lower premiums and then walk away with it. So let's wrap up. Make sure that we think about our long-term care planning in advance. And let's talk about just a few steps. Number one, if you do have a spouse, sit down with your spouse and talk through these topics and say, what do you think, spouse? Does this make sense to you? Is this something we should be thinking about? Is this something we can afford? Number two, if you need help, talk with someone. You can talk to us as financial planners. You can go talk to a long-term care insurance specialist. Be careful. If you do talk to an insurance person, they are going to sell you insurance. So they may not have your best interest in mind. They may have their commission in mind. And I'm not saying insurance people are terrible people. I'm simply saying they do have a conflict of interest we need to be sensitive to when we're asking their opinion on things. And make a determination. What is going to be our plan? If you're in your mid-40s, late 40s, you've got time to think about it and formulate it in your head. If you're in your mid-50s, now is the time where you really want to start putting that plan together, because if you need to insure, you want to buy your insurance policies today, ASAP, so you can lock in those low premiums.
And make sure to review it yearly, because your health changes, the laws change, and as we talked about, costs change.
For now, keep planning and stay intentional.
Thank you for listening to Retirement GPS, navigated by Zenergy. To explore today's topic further, visit our blog Mile Markers at zenergyretirement.com/blog, where we offer detailed strategies, examples, and downloadable tools to support your retirement journey. Follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook at Zenergy Retirement Planning for weekly insights, checklists, and planning reminders. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe, leave a 5-star review, and share it with someone planning for their future. Until next time, keep navigating toward a confident retirement. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended as investment, legal, or tax advice. Listeners should consult their own financial, tax, and legal advisors before making any decisions. Zenergy Retirement Planning is a registered investment advisor located in Red Bank, New Jersey. Thank you for listening to Retirement GPS, navigated by Zenergy. To explore today's topic further, visit our blog Mile Markers at zenergyretirement.com/blog, where we offer detailed strategies, examples, and downloadable tools to support your retirement journey. Follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook at Zenergy Retirement Planning for weekly insights, checklists, and planning reminders. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe, leave a 5-star review, and share it with someone planning for their future. Until next time, keep navigating toward a confident retirement. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended as investment, legal, or tax advice. Listeners should consult their own financial, tax, and legal advisors before making any decisions. Zenergy Retirement Planning is a registered investment advisor located in Red Bank, New Jersey.